Hey guys, this is Myleik and this is the podcast. Earlier this week on my socials, I posted about judging yourself for not mastering things you were never taught. On my threads and on my Instagram, I said, you're judging yourself for not mastering things you were never taught. These are learnable life skills, not character flaws. And there's one slide that I have where I talk about one of my pet peeves being the phrase big age, at this big age, at your big age. And so I'm going to get into some of the meat behind these learnable life skills. But if you will allow me to rant about why I don't like at this big age, because there's a few things. Number one, it's rooted in shame. And if we haven't learned anything, it's that shame and learning don't go hand in hand. It's really difficult to learn something new when you have shame. And so perhaps there are some things that someone could have learned, maybe tying your shoes by the time you're an adult, but that's often not what the phrase is used for. Something else I don't love about this is that it reinforces the lie that adulthood equals mastery. Just because you haven't learned the skill in question, emotional intelligence, boundaries, finances, all of that, doesn't mean, there's no time limit on it just because you are in adulthood. Another reason why I don't love it, it's anti-evolution. How are we supposed to evolve, heal generational patterns, or try something new if we're shamed the moment we step out and try? Number 4, it discourages vulnerability. At your big age can silence people who are genuinely trying to grow by suggesting that their efforts are laughable or embarrassing. Last one is that sometimes it's a projection. The phrase sometimes is said by someone uncomfortable with their own unfinished business. Oh, you're still trying at your big age. Might that be a trigger for them? So let's go ahead and retire this phrase. And honestly, I feel like it says more about the person saying it than the one it's directed at. We don't need more shame around growth. We need more space for learning and becoming, because here's the truth. You might be learning something late, but you're still learning it. And that's the whole point. Now let's talk about what is actually happening when people judge themselves for not having mastered certain things. We are going to unpack some things in this episode. We're going to unpack why you're not broken, why it's not too late, why your age is not too big. These are just skills that you were never taught. And the good news is you can still learn them. So let's get into that. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Where did we even get the idea that adulthood equals mastery? That by the time you hit a certain age, you should have it all figured out. Who told us that? That when you turn 18 and graduate high school, you magically know what to do next. Or when you turn 21, you have most of it figured out. Or certainly by 30 and 40, girl, please. Most of us were raised in environments, homes, schools, even media, where adulthood was presented like a finish line. Am I wrong? Wasn't adulthood presented like a finish line than a training ground? Like once you got there, you'd know how to parent, how to manage money, how to regulate your emotions, how to navigate conflict, how to love, how to rest. But nobody talked about how learning continues. Nobody said you won't get all the downloads and everything you're supposed to know just because your age turned 30. Instead, many of us watched adults pretend that they knew everything.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
We saw people coping, masking, overworking, and surviving, and most of them were doing it silently. And what do kids do when something isn't explained to them? They fill in the blanks. I learned that from all my time working with Dr. Becky over at Good Inside and all the learning of what kids do when they don't know. They fill in the blanks. So we made this leap. If I don't know how to do this by now, something must be wrong with me. And that thought, it grows into a belief. The belief might sound something like, everyone else knows something I don't. I'm behind. I can't tell you how many times I work with people who tell me I'm behind. I should have known this already. And that belief leads to shame. Shame for not being organized enough. Shame for struggling in relationships. Shame for being anxious, messy, insecure, or just tired. And here's the thing. None of that is a character flaw. It is simply a skills gap. So let's talk about what happens after that thought pops in. I should know this by now. That thought doesn't just pass through quietly typically. Most of the time it lingers. And if you don't catch it, that thought is going to plant some seeds, some shame seeds. And here's what we know from the research. And I see this with my clients all the time. A thought is just a thought. But the moment you fuse with it, meaning you accept it as truth, it becomes a part of how you see yourself. So instead of, I wasn't taught how to manage money, we start to think, I'm bad with money. I'm irresponsible. I'm a mess. Instead of, I never learned boundaries because no one respected mine, we go to, I'm weak, or I always let people play me or walk all over me. And because that thought feels true, we start living it out. And it shows up how we speak, how we move, what we tolerate, what we believe we deserve. It becomes a part of our identity. I'm not good with time. I'm too emotional. I always mess things up. These are not facts. They're stories you have been repeating. And here's the thing I tell my clients all the time. If it is a story that we are not attaching to but noticing, that means we can rewrite the story. And rewriting our stories doesn't mean we're denying the past. It means we're updating the narrative with the truth. We're updating the narrative with compassion, and we're updating the narrative with skills. That's some of the work I do. We get curious about the stories. We learn to separate from the thought instead of fusing with it. We build the capacity to observe without judgment. And from there, we start practicing new skills that actually support the life you're trying to live. This is what changes things, not shame, not hustle, not fixing yourself. This is going to take skill building and story shifting, okay? There's nothing wrong with you. You're just living by a story that you never got to edit until now. I want to tell you something, y'all. I didn't learn about emotional regulation until I became a parent at damn near 40. I had no idea it was even a thing until I birthed a child who didn't have the skill either. Funny how that happens. There's nothing like realizing you have incredibly limited emotional tools until you are tasked with teaching them to a tiny human, usually after you've been fully triggered. Boundaries, what are those? I'll never forget being a teenager, sitting across from a white therapist who told me, if your mom starts cussing you out, you just hang up the phone. Ma'am, hang up on who? Are you trying to get me killed? But listen, I tucked that tool in my back pocket. And there was a time when I was like, I have this tool. I'm going to use it. The first time I did it, I was scared as hell. But I did it and it worked. It was terrifying. And I started to build that skill inch by inch over 2 decades. Did you hear me? 2. Still doing it. And I want to be clear, it's not a finish line. It's a muscle like the gym. You just learn how to hold more weight over time. You get stronger and stronger with handling heavier or harder things over time. Time management, that came easier because I had a parent who did not play about time. But that wasn't a moral success. It was a molded structure. Money, I didn't start figuring that out until I was in my 30s. Asking for help, becoming a parent, broke that wall down real quick. I didn't really have much of a choice. Not having it all together, who does? I'll wait. These aren't character flaws. These are skills. And if you were never taught them, how would you know? So I want to take a moment, you guys, and name some of the most common things people are quietly struggling with and wrongly judging themselves for. Because sometimes naming something is the beginning of healing. That I know for sure. When we don't name it, we carry it, we internalize it. But the moment you say, this is a skill I was never taught, instead of this is something broken in me, a lot of things start to shift. Naming is a way of telling the truth. It's a way of saying, this is real. And now that it's real, I can work with it. So let's name them. Emotional regulation, setting and holding boundaries, being on time, time management, managing money or saving, knowing what you want in life, following through on things. I'm going to go back. Did you hear that I said that is something you learn, knowing what you want? I don't know. I just don't know. That is something you can learn, following through on things. I have no follow-up. You can learn that. Asking for help, learnable, resting without guilt, not having it all together. These are all things that you can learn. None of these are moral issues. These are life skills. And the moment we name them, we stop fighting ourselves and start supporting ourselves. And that's what the rest of this podcast is about. This is about supporting yourself. In the now hundreds of hours that I've spent working with people one-on-one, I can tell you this with nearly absolute certainty. I have never met a client who needed to work harder. I have never met someone who needed to be more consistent. People love consistency. I need to be more consistent. That word just wears me down, because what I do see over and over again is this: people who are carrying shame about who they are instead of learning how to support who they are, where they are. So I see people carrying shame about who they are instead of learning how to support where they are. You don't need more pressure. And yet that's what people want to, give themselves. So many times it's like, every time I do the Magic Hour workshop, I started out and I ask people, why are you here? What are you coming for? And everyone's like, I need more systems. I need more, a framework. And people are wanting to put more pressure on themselves. And instead of more pressure, you need more compassionate structure. Instead of a louder inner critic, you need more tools. So let's play around with what this might look like. We're not going to bypass the truth, but we're going to start telling the whole truth. And this is when I start getting to this part of the work with my clients, it's the hot seat. I like to say the story that you're currently telling about who you are and where you are in your life, it might be true, but what's a truer story? And then I'm going to push you a little bit harder to tell the truest story. So here are some of the most common ones we might work with. An old thought might be, I procrastinate all the time. A new one might be, I don't procrastinate all the time. And then I might ask you for evidence, because we say these things without thinking these things. We don't realize that these are simply thoughts. And so when we say, well, I don't procrastinate all the time, then I say, well, give me some evidence of why you don't procrastinate all the time. And it's like, well, by the time we get through talking, they've told me now 5 things that they did before 9 a.m. So if you finished 5 things before you walked out the door, how do you procrastinate all the time? I don't know how to set boundaries. Or is it that you're learning how to set boundaries? I'm bad with money. Or is it that money wasn't modeled for you and you're learning about money? I don't finish things. Something might be, I finished something today, because I know you finished something today. I should be further along. A newer thought, a truer story is, I am on my own timeline. I'm always overwhelmed. That might be true. That might be how you feel. A truer thought is, sometimes I'm overwhelmed. I'm a mess. A truer thought, I'm not a mess. The truest thought is, my thinking is a mess. And this one is important for a host of reasons. My thinking is a mess separates your identity from the experience. It invites self-compassion and curiosity. It's about your thoughts, not you. It reminds you that thoughts aren't true. When we can start to observe our thoughts instead of becoming our thoughts, we can start to gain some of our power back. So I want to take a moment and bring it all full circle for you. You are not behind, okay? When you're out with your friends, or the next time you're on the phone, or the next time you're with someone and you're talking about being behind, you are not behind. I haven't heard people say broken, because that was, I feel like a couple of decades ago, that was something that people were using. And I think we all kind of know now that we're not broken. But I do want to say, you're not too old. You're not too far gone. It's not too late. You're just someone who wasn't taught certain things, and now you're brave enough to face these things. That's not a weakness. That's growth. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop judging yourself and start supporting yourself. That's the work I do. In all these hours, I've never met someone who needed more hustle, more discipline, or more consistency. I'm serious. Every time I've not. There are some other things that perhaps are needed, but it's not that. And the thing that I know for sure, what is needed is a new way of thinking, a new set of tools, a safe place to practice something different. And I really want to say practice, because sometimes it's like, well, at this big age, or you just took the training wheels off some of these skills, and you have forgotten that even with the training wheels off of some of these skills that you have practiced and you've learned, you still might fall down with them. You probably are going to, and there's going to be bumps in the road. And so it is okay if you are practicing something different. And so if this episode felt like it was speaking directly to where you are right now, that's not a coincidence. I'd love to work with you. I have private coaching, workshops, magic hour, and something new I'm ready to roll out. There is a place for you here. So visit myleak.com to learn more, or just join my waitlist. And remember, you don't have to figure it all out today, but you can stop pretending you were supposed to already know. You are allowed to learn even now, especially now. Forward this podcast to someone who needs it, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Bye, y'all.